There are three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. Welcome to the Triangle Report. I'm Michael Wintemute. I'm continuing with my story about journalism. Part one was about the history of journalism, really up until the internet. And today we'll finish off and talk about some couple of stories that I have that sort of give you an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of real issues or real false or fake news. So in part one, we reviewed the history of journalism and the evolution of rules and guidelines that were developed over time. And I finished part one with the following paragraph. In 1990, most of us did not know the word internet, let alone what it meant. Today, it is almost impossible to live without it. When you would be at your local supermarket standing at the checkout, you would see a tabloid newspaper known for their celebrity gossip, crime news, and investigative reporting, but not recognized as a source for accurate and researched news. To some degree, they were considered fake news, although we never used that term. Since the growth of the internet, the term fake news has replaced such responses to issues as "I don't agree with that comment" or "the facts do not support those claims," to name a couple. The words fake news roll off the tongue of politicians, business leaders, and internet influencers that don't like a question or have an answer to a question that would most likely be a lie. False news has been spread throughout history, but the term fake news was first used in the 1890s when it became common for sensationalism to be reported in newspapers. While the term does not have a fixed definition, it has been applied broadly to any type of false information presented as news. It has become common for individuals with a high profile, politicians, business leaders, to apply the term to news that they consider unfavorable to them. False information, referred to as disinformation, involves spreading false stories or suggestions which are meant to cause harmful intent and is often generated and propagated by hostile foreign actors, particularly during elections. Fake news also includes satirical articles misinterpreted as genuine, and articles that include sensationalist or clickbait headlines that are not supported in the text. The current prevalence of fake news has increased with the rise of social media, most noticeably in Facebook news feeds, and this misinformation is becoming more common in the mainstream media. Real news or factual news is often impacted today as it competes with fake news. During the US presidential election in 2016, it was determined that the top fake news stories received more engagement on Facebook than the top stories from major media outlets. President Trump has been credited with popularizing the term fake news, using it to describe any negative press coverage of himself. Many politicians, both in autocratic and democratic countries, have made demands to have effective self-regulations or legally enforced regulations in varying forms for social media and web search engines. As I discussed in part one of this article, unlike printed news and broadcast news, radio and television, where you have a code of practice, a code of ethics, there are no rules for internet content. Editors and producers are responsible for fact-checking their journalists and reporters, but these positions do not exist in the internet world. Until the internet, conspiracy theorists had very few options for finding and retaining an audience. With social media and the internet more broadly, it is now possible for individuals and groups to push misinformation that aligns with their beliefs and disparage that which does not. As I have pointed out in a prior article, there is truth and perceived truth. Deciding on an action without having all the facts can potentially be dangerous and can be just as detrimental to do so based on information that is inaccurate. You may have an opinion on something and find online information that supports what you believe as proof to the validity of the argument that you are making. However, an article suggesting something that you don't happen to agree with may not be fake news, just as information that you do agree with may not always be true. So the question we have to ask ourselves, do we want fair and honest reporting on events and issues that are relevant to us? If social media and online content does not adhere to any code of ethics or have any requirement to verify the facts, we can't just assume when we follow a podcaster or find information that supports our own beliefs that the information is factual. There is also the term influencer, which is someone who creates content such as posts, videos, or streams that attract a large audience. An influencer can also be someone who is in a position of authority, often a politician who answers a question in a way that indicates a positive or negative response without actually addressing the answer in a definitive yes or no. So let's review a couple of articles, one that is designed to mislead the reader and one that is clearly blatantly lying. This particular example is from an article written by Luc Lebrun, editor of Press Progress, titled Canada Proud Launches Attack Ads Linking Mark Carney to Notorious Pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, the child sex offender. Apparently, Canada Proud is a social media and advocacy group started by a gentleman by the name of Jeff Ballingall that promotes Canadian values, achievements, and national pride. One of their values, it seems, is using social media to question the integrity of people, using at best nothing more than speculation. Canada Proud uses a picture taken in 2013 of Mr. Carney and his wife standing next to Ghislaine Maxwell, who was a friend partner of Mr. Epstein's. Mr. Carney was employed at Goldman Sachs for 13 years, working in their Toronto, Boston, London, Tokyo, and New York offices. During his time at Goldman Sachs, he held senior positions in areas such as co-head of sovereign risk, executive director for emerging debt capital markets, and managing director for investment banking. Mr. Carney also worked on South African post-apartheid ventures into international bond markets and was involved in Goldman Sachs' work with the 1998 Russian financial crisis. Mr. Carney left Goldman Sachs in 2003, taking the position with the Bank of Canada as Deputy Governor. He joined the Department of Finance as Senior Associate Deputy Minister in November 2004, and he served under two finance ministers, Ralph Goodall, a Liberal, and Jim Flaherty, a Conservative. In October of 2007, Mr. Carney was appointed the Governor of the Bank of Canada and formally assumed the position from David Dodge on February 1st, 2008, just as the 2007 financial crisis was escalating due to the predatory lending in the form of subprime mortgages. This created a liquidity crisis that spread globally, causing the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers in September 2008, which triggered a stock market crash and a crisis in international banking. The actions taken by Mr. Carney are said to have played a substantial role in helping Canada avoid the worst impact of the crisis. During this time, the Canadian economy outperformed those of its G7 peers, and Canada was the first G7 nation to have both its gross domestic product and employment recover to pre-crisis levels. It was announced in November 2012 that Mr. Carney was appointed the Governor of the Bank of England. Mr. Carney was the first non-Briton to be appointed to the position since the Bank of England was established in 1694. While the term for the position was usually for 8 years, Mr. Carney only intended to serve for 5 years and stepped down in 2018. During Mr. Carney's time at the Bank of England, he introduced changes to the bank's operating procedures to help modernize the institution by participating in more media appearances than its predecessors, which included controversial announcements during 2 referendums. Mr. Carney agreed to extend his term for 1 year while the United Kingdom undertook Brexit negotiations. He agreed to a further 7 months in September 2018 to support a smooth exit from the European Union and to a further 2 months for an orderly transition with his successor. Now that we have a little history on Mr. Carney, let's go back to the picture. It was estimated that Mr. Epstein had a net worth of in the area of about $500 million. I have no idea if Mr. Epstein had business relations with Goldman Sachs, but given Mr. Carney's senior role with Goldman Sachs, it should be no surprise that Mr. Carney and Mr. Epstein would have attended functions in New York where they both would have been in attendance. Ghislaine Maxwell, the friend partner of Mr. Epstein's, was also the daughter of Robert Maxwell, a British newspaper baron. Robert Maxwell would have been invited to events that Mr. Carney would have attended in his role with Goldman Sachs and as Governor of the Bank of England. I guess if Canada Proud's founder, Jeff Ballingall, came across a photo of Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler together, and these photos exist, by using his strong Canadian values, he would conclude Neville Chamberlain might be a member of the Nazi Party. Perhaps Mr. Ballingall gets asked by law enforcement to view photos of individuals who may be potential pedophiles, given what Mr. Ballingall seems to suggest is his intimate capability of determining a pedophile based on publicly available photographs. Sadly, this is an example of misleading, or more specifically, deceptive information. Press Progress reached out to Pierre Poilievre's spokesperson, but he did not respond to multiple requests to clarify if Mr. Poilievre condones Canada Proud's Carney Epstein ad attacks. The American statesman John McCain represented the state of Arizona in the United States Congress for over 35 years. He was a representative from 1983 to 1987, and then as a U.S. Senator from 1987 until his death in 2018. He was the Republican Party's nominee in the 2008 U.S. presidential election, running against the Democratic Party nominee, Barack Obama. Mr. McCain was hosting a town hall event just a month before the 2008 presidential election in Lakeville, Minnesota, when a constituent made the following comment during a town hall. The woman called Obama an Arab at the height of a conspiracy movement claiming Obama, who was born in Hawaii, was not a natural-born American citizen and therefore ineligible for the presidency. Mr. McCain responded, "No, ma'am, he's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about," McCain said to applause. There were those that criticized Mr. McCain's response as furthering anti-Arab and anti-Muslim sentiment, but the exchange was considered a defining moment in Mr. McCain's decades-long political career. The Associated Press called it a reflection of McCain's thinking and that partisans should disagree without demonizing each other, and the Washington Post named it one of McCain's most courageous political moments. For those that have followed American politics since the 1970s or 80s, you'd be well aware of John McCain and his strong ethical principles, most often referred to as integrity. Compare Mr. McCain's response to the response of the Conservative Party and their leader, Mr. Poilievre, which by saying nothing was to condone the suggestion that Mr. Carney was linked to Mr. Epstein. I guess Canada Proud's Canadian values are not necessarily aligned with the values of many Canadians. So this is another example where, everyone knows or has worked with a person who is always the victim. Everything that goes wrong is someone else's fault. They get blamed for things they never did. Their manager is out to get them. Their ex-spouse is making up stories so they can't get visitations to see their children, and it goes on. It doesn't take long to figure out they are always lying. Sadly, the most well-known liar is Donald Trump. Since early in the 1970s, Donald Trump had built a reputation as a person who would exaggerate in order to do a deal, use fraud to manipulate property values and investors, and make promises he had no intention of keeping. A former budget director of New York and publisher made the comment, "I wouldn't believe Donald Trump if his tongue were notarized." Donald Trump claims that everything that happens to him is being orchestrated by his enemies. Who are these so-called enemies? He blames the Democrats, and more specifically, President or past President Biden. The legal system, most often citing Democratic appointees, judges, and the United States Department of Justice at the instruction of the Attorney General. So let's have a look at some of these cases that have been brought against him. So the first case is a case of E. Jean Carroll versus Donald J. Trump, whereby Ms. Carroll accuses Mr. Trump of sexual assault sometime in late 1995 or early 1996. The case began in 2023 when Ms. Carroll sued Trump for sexual assault and defamation. Ultimately, Trump was found guilty of sexual abuse and for defaming Carroll in 2022 when he denied her allegations. The second case is the case of the people of the United States, or the state of New York, against Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. The third case, United States versus of America versus Donald J. Trump and two other gentlemen. A grand jury indictment brought 40 felony counts against Trump related to his alleged mishandling of classified documents after his first presidency, to which he pleaded not guilty. Following Trump's election victory in November 2024, the Justice Department decided to wind down the case due in part to its longstanding policy not to prosecute a sitting president. In case number 4, the state of Georgia versus Donald J. Trump and all, it is the case where it is alleged that Trump led a criminal racketeering enterprise in which he and all other defendants knowingly and willfully joined a conspiracy to unlawfully change the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election in Georgia. This case is not yet set. In case number 5, the United States of America versus Donald J. Trump, it was a federal criminal case regarding his alleged participation in attempting to overturn the 2020 U.S. presidential election, including his involvement in the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. And again, following Trump's election victory in November 2024, the Justice Department decided to file a motion to dismiss the case without prejudice, due in part to its longstanding policy not to prosecute a sitting president. In cases number 1 and 2, they went to trial and Mr. Trump was found guilty. In cases 3 and 5, as these were federal charges and Mr. Trump was reelected president, these cases were dismissed. It should be noted the case number 3 was dismissed by the appointed judge and the dismissal was in appeal. It should also be noted that Mr. Trump was not exonerated in these cases. They were dismissed due to his election to the presidency. In case number 4, as this is a state charge, the federal justice does not have jurisdiction and therefore it can continue even though Mr. Trump is the current president. So let's consider Mr. Trump's claim that these charges were brought against him by President Biden and his weaponization of the United States Department of Justice. Case number 1 goes back to late 1995 or 96. If in fact Mr. Trump's claim is true, then President Biden, prior to late 1995, would have to know that Mr. Trump would be elected president and enter office on January 20th, 2017, and then President Biden would also have knowledge of the fact that he would beat President Trump in the election of 2020 and be sworn in as president on January 20th, 2021. So in order for President Biden to make President Trump's life as miserable as possible, and given President Biden's ability to see into the future, he set up a process of manipulation against President Trump, which started prior to 1996. Mr. Biden got Donald Trump to go into a change room with E. Jean Carroll and sexually assault her. Mr. Biden convinced Trump to falsify documents, start a university, set up a foundation, and have sex with a porn star. However, Sleepy Joe's not finished. While Trump is president, he gets Trump to try and get the vote count changed in the state of Georgia and cause an attack on the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. But Joe's not a quitter. He's not quite finished. Prior to Joe moving into the White House, he gets his Corvette out of hibernation, drives to the White House, sneaks into the White House, and loads up top secret documents and drives into President Trump's home in Florida, where he manages to unload the documents, all accomplished without ever being seen. Add stealthy to Joe's sleepy. All the information with respect to these court cases against President Trump are public documents which can be accessed. I think most people would question whether or not President Biden has or had the ability to manipulate Donald Trump. However, either Trump is lying when he suggests these charges are fake or weaponized against him, otherwise he was manipulated. If he was manipulated, one would have to conclude he is the most incompetent individual to have ever held the position of President of the United States of America. You decide. Living in a democratic system allows us the freedom of expression, something that we take for granted because we have only lived in this environment. As I have pointed out, print and television media follows a code of ethics, but internet content has no code of ethics and therefore is a bastion of both truth and lies and information and misinformation. You cannot assume that every podcast you follow is providing you with the truth. If the topic is of concern to you, you should take the time to do some of your own research in order to verify that the information is factual. So let me leave you with this thought. If you decided to move to Korea, there are two countries with the name Korea. One is called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the other one is called the Republic of Korea. Depending on whether or not your preference is living in a democracy or a dictatorship, you can only choose based on the name. Which one would you choose? If democracy is your choice of government, you would probably choose the one with the word democracy in it. It gets more complicated because a republic is a form or system of government, but it can be a democracy, a dictatorship, or something in between. In this case, without doing the research, you only have a 50% chance of ending up living in the government system of your preference. Now, in the one that's not a democracy, a 22-year-old Korean man was executed in 2022 for listening to 70 Korean K-pop songs, watching some Western films, and sharing them with his friends. This activity violated a law that bans reactionary ideology and culture. Without research, it is a tough choice. Thanks for taking time to view this video. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with a friend, give me a like, or better yet, subscribe. It would be ever appreciated.